This is a quick update on my stippled pear, and there is a whole long story about why this one drawing is taking so long. What I do when I'm doing a drawing is, if it's a plant, I research it. This one, which is a pear, and there are pear trees around, also means other things to me. So I've been kind of off on a funny path, exploring all different things to get to the point where I felt what I was putting into this drawing was going to be complete now. So it's taken a long time. The paper's a little dirty, and the beauty of pen and ink stippling is that the drawing will still be gorgeous when I'm done. Now, I'm using a 3/0 Kohinoor rapidograph, and the one thing I wanted to point out while I'm doing this, you have seen very detailed highlights that are white paper, or in this case over here, just all yellow. I have a pale green in the pen now, and I have just started to fill this in with a pale green. Now, this is usually the scariest part of the drawing. When you go to blend in the highlights so that it looks like a natural subject, if you leave them too bright, it'll look too graphic, and if you fill them in too much, they'll actually look not only out of place, but darker than the area around them. So in this particular drawing, this is like a neutral yellow area that is really more or less the highlight. So the point is to, and this is a little bit darker because that side of the pear would be underneath. So these are my two reference points of how to fill in the other highlights. These over here, these two, and this one up here, they're all going to be on a cool color scale as opposed to a warm scale. The light green I'm using right now is FW acrylic light green. And when you're doing this, because you don't want to build it up immediately, it's best to work in a triangle, in the sense where you put 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Because then they are spaced out enough where over here I started to get a line that I don't think the camera is going to show. But if you work in a triangle and even work outside the highlight area, you're automatically blending this in. Now here I have to work in a line just a bit to bring that, excuse me, a little bit closer. But you really want to work in a triangle or a square, something where they're not right next to each other. And this is a cool green that I can do a even layer of dots in these white areas. In the cool green, they did not have yellow down first, which the yellow I'm using is processed yellow by FW acrylic, which means when I put the green down before the yellow, the green is going to remain more visible because it's going to come up through the transparent yellow. Over here, it's mainly just yellow. And if I work in big triangles or big squares, they'll be like the essence of green. But when you put the yellow down first and green on top of it, you're covering the yellow. When you put the green down first and then the yellow on top of that, you're actually using more of a layering technique where the green will come up through the yellow and give you a mixed color. So this is a little bit in lines, this one little area right here, But I can fix that because around it is going to be darker. So when I come in with the darker colors, I can also make it jagged on the edge to make it look more natural. So I got delayed in finishing this because I went off to do research about what I'm putting into it. And so now I'm back at it again. And don't feel bad if that's what you do. I don't do that with all my drawings. I usually sit down, start them, and finish them. This one is a little bit unusual. Now this area has like 3 or 4 layers, and if I try to get closer, the camera's not going to pick up the detail. It's got 3 or 4 layers of color already. So now I'm at the point where in this area, the more layers I put on top, the more the finished color is going to be. In other words, I'm now putting light green on here, and because this is an acrylic ink that dries with a fairly rigid surface, this is going to be more and more green, even if I put yellow on top of it. And again, you don't want to overwork it with like a dark green or a dark brown because it'll turn it that color. The more layers you have on there with acrylic ink stippling, the more you're forming a solid layer. It's made up of millions of dots, but because there are layers of color, you're actually forming a solid layer of acrylic ink. So all of these things come into it when you're doing this. And as far as the highlights go, that's the scary part, because it could go either way. But you can see just with a little bit of light green, this one up here has softened. Now if I put yellow on top of that, I might even be able to just leave it, because you don't always want the highlights to be what your eye notices. You want to be able to look at this and say, wow, I could pick that pear up. That's the goal. So just an update on the stippled pear.